My name's Claire Callison. I'm the Director of National Operations for Austin Pets Alive. I've been there for about almost 5 years now, really focused in Texas, but of course focused all over the country. We help shelters with everything from intake to placement, all outcomes. So if you need help, definitely get my contact. Happy to share resources. My lovely co-host.
My name is Luis Quintanilla, and I'm the Executive Director for the Rio Grande Valley Humane Society. Thank you so much for being with us. We operate 2 facilities in South Texas, one in Mission, Texas, in Hidalgo County, and one in Harlingen, Texas, in Cameron County. So a bit of a commute between the 2, about an hour distance, but our total intake is about 8,000 a year. So yeah, happy to be here to talk to you about how we try to manage all that.
And you all saw Luis, if you came to the opening session, he did a great job. You did awesome. So this will be good. It's very inspirational. So it'll be great to dive in on this topic a little bit. So we'll start with a little, this will not be a downer, I promise, but raise your hand if anyone here has felt a strain or a challenge when it comes to this year, increasing your foster and adoption placements. Okay, all right, got it. We're in the right room, exactly. And so you're not alone. Obviously, we're all here for that reason and probably more in other sessions. National data is telling a similar story. So you haven't lost your mind. What you're feeling is true, but this isn't doom and gloom. The heavy dark line, this is all from Best Friends data for 2022, is the national intake numbers. So you can see an increase there. That bottom line, that little faint orange line, that is our adoption rate. So you can see that spike during COVID. And really we're at, it's not a huge decline, but a plateau, right? We've stalled, as been highlighted in the data. But I see this as an opportunity. Don't get bummed about this. I feel this is all opportunity for us. I think it's important to also think about what we can and cannot control. So things we can't control, sometimes is staffing, sometimes is vet shortages, sometimes it's economic strains in your community, hardships in the community. But what we have control of is how we change our process, how we react to some of these real challenges that are out there. And adoption and foster placements, in our eyes, is one of the easiest, well, maybe not easiest, but the lowest hanging fruit in an area that we can make change today. So think of this as an opportunity. I believe strongly that this is going to take us to tear down our process, really dig in, and figure out what we can be doing differently and keeping an open mind. That being said, we were just talking how we've been to presentations before where there is this big vision. You've heard about getting rid of barriers, but we've always been like, well, how do you actually do it? Like, what are the tools? Show us some templates. We're gonna go through all that today. And in the conference app, we have a resource guide with links in there. So if you didn't catch it on the slide, you can hopefully get in that app or email one of us. We'll be happy to share it with you. Really good resources on there that you can take home and literally copy and paste, insert logo here. So, all right, if anyone isn't aware, I would definitely check out this website and this organization's incredible Care, Companions and Animals for Reform and Equity. If you haven't heard of them, they have some really good resources and really good narrative videos that are very compelling and have truly helped me form the way I look at adoptions and the way I look at our communities and fostering. I love this quote. It's not about making a statement, it's about making changes. So that's what we're really gonna focus on today. There is a place for statements and we're gonna talk about that. They are important, but a statement only can do you so much if there's not action behind there. Big picture, we're gonna talk about it a little bit and then we're gonna dive down into the top 5 things you can do today. But understanding implicit bias, I think we've all heard about implicit bias and its role and how it affects our everyday decision making. But it's not our fault. A lot of times it's our lived experience. It's how we were brought up. It's what we've been exposed to, our privileges, our environment. And oftentimes the thing about implicit bias is it's unconscious. We're not always conscious about the decisions we're making and quite frankly, some of the fears that we have. And so that bleeds into our work a lot. And it bleeds into those split-second decisions you're making on application questions, on your policies. So I'm gonna challenge everyone today to really question your internal, we all have them, but internal fears and stereotypes, and think of this as really a spectrum. So you might start in a certain place. I know when I was brought up in the animal well-being space and in my first job as adoption counselor, I was raised a way to just weed out people. And so I was denying adoptions. I was, doing the 12-page questionnaires or applications. And I felt like a sense of gotcha, when I denied someone, because that's how I was brought up. So I've had to undo a lot of those things. And so we're going to walk you through some of those things today. So I think that's really important. We have to take just a gauge and a temperature check of what we're bringing to the table and the baggage we carry. Reflecting on our current practices and keeping an open mind. We just talked about that, but I'll ask you to do that in this presentation. There might be things that you bristle at what we talk about and say, well, my community is different. That's not going to work for me. Challenge yourself. Please keep an open mind, and we would ask that you do that when you go home too, when you're working with your colleagues and your staff. Like I mentioned before, a lot of our processes and a lot of how we have shifted and how we've started with adoptions and fostering is looking for ways to say no. Those gotcha questions, those red flags, right? I think we've all been part of that, and we feel like it's our job to be almost interrogators and to weed out the bad players. So we have to shift that way of thinking, and definitely check out the CARE website. They have a really good video about, are we looking for ways to say no? And it's very compelling. All right, so we're going to jump into the action items. We've got 5. I'm going to hand it over to Luis to go over number 1.
Great. Thank you, Claire. So one of the biggest things that we implemented as soon as we started really making changes over at what was then known as the Humane Society of Harlingen was heading out a letter of expectations. There are a lot of practices that we just sort of inherited, and that everybody, I mean, how many of you in here have heard the old saying, right? Well, this is the way it's always been done. Well, it's just how we've always done it. Or I don't know that we can. And then you ask just one follow-up question, why? And then it's just blank stares, right? So at the time, I would just listen in on my adoption counselors, in Harlingen, and kind of practicing those inherited, conversations that you don't really ever question yourself. You just kind of know that maybe we got to try to find a way to say no and weed out people. And I thought, well, what are we doing? I mean, there are 2 freezers in our euthanasia room, and we're going to fill them up in like one day if we keep on trying to figure this out. And is this home really worse than a freezer for this animal? I don't understand the equation here. And so, yeah, so really it's all about being non-judgmental in an unreasonable way, and letting the conversation kind of dictate how you approach that interaction. So, I mean, people can reveal a lot about themselves if you just have open-ended conversations with them. And so when it comes to that letter of expectations, what I really wanted to highlight was sort of a roadmap for my staff, because, if I can tell them the goal, great, who cares, right? They're going to stop listening, but you kind of have to offer them that sort of detailed pathway, and, there's actionable metrics. And so that's what we did. And, then COVID happened. And so, that was in February of 2020 that we started implementing these new programs. And so a lot of things seemed to go out the window, but instead of approaching that with fear, we started approaching that as a once in a lifetime. Hopefully, COVID is a once in a lifetime opportunity to really make changes at a much faster pace. Our structure in Harlingen and in Mission is that the animal control is under the health department. So they got kind of busy for a couple of years, and we thought, okay, great, we're going to absolutely exploit this opportunity to do whatever we want to do as fast as possible without the health department breathing down my neck. And the thinking was, okay, if we can really open up adoptions and really get this going, our community is going to start to get to know us. They're going to start to trust us. And once COVID is over, taxpayers will be used to this level of service, really trying to reframe their expectations of what we do. And so, yeah, we are huge believers and proponents of huddles, of team huddles. And, we have 2 locations now, so sometimes the geography is a little bit prohibitive and a little bit complicated, but we do this on the team level. So, we have basically our life-saving team handling foster, rescue, adoption, all that stuff. And we have our animal care staff that are handling the intake, all that stuff, basic animal care, and sort of our medical staff. And so that's kind of the rough sketch of how we have our structure in our facilities. And so we like to have meetings with all those departments individually, and then staff meetings when we can do that as often as possible, because communication is the key. Not only externally with your potential adopters or fosters, but internally. You can't really move forward unless you guys are all on the same page. So Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, and one of the biggest, I think, barriers that we face is just ourselves, right? The fear of change. I mean, I don't know about you. I mean, this is a really kind of a sad thing to discuss, but how many of you have been in a facility that euthanasia rates are like through the roof? I mean, I've been there. I've had to do it. I've had to hold for hundreds, thousands of animals, and for me, no change, no potential new policy is ever going to be as scary as returning to those days. That's terrifying. I mean, can you hear it? Can you smell it? Do you remember what it was like, the feeling like that your heart starts to race when you know that you've run out of options? To me, nothing is scarier than that. So when I hear experts like Claire, when I hear experts from best friends about, hey, there's potentially a new way, I'm just thinking, let's do it. Let's try anything because, my God, animals are irreplaceable. And you can always go back to the status quo, right? So yeah, I think we got a bit of an exercise here.
Yeah, we thought it's the end of the day. I promise this won't be too painful. So I'll ask if you're able to stand up. I promise it won't be painful. If you're not able or not comfortable, you can raise your hand. We did not, full disclaimer, we did not create this exercise, but I think if you're thinking, I'm going to go home and my foster parents are not going to agree with this. My staff is not going to agree with this. This is something you can do on Zoom. You can just have people raise their hand or have a reaction on Zoom, or you can do it in person. So we're going to go through this. I think we've got, maybe we'll shift just a little bit. Sorry, I can try to move that projector. All right, so if you've done this before, this will be repeat. If you've never done this, let's go through it. All right, so if I'm going to ask you to sit down, I'll read this out loud. If you've had a pet or added another pet and not disclosed or you've had a pet or added one, but you didn't disclose it on your lease and they're not allowed. So go ahead and sit down. If you've snuck a foster dog or your own dog. All right, we're going to see. This is a challenge. You can keep standing. This might get you who has had to, repeatedly, this is your schedule, you work, you've had to leave a dog crated for 8+ hours, they're home alone without a bathroom break for 8+ hours. Anyone? It's okay, no shame, we're not judging each other. I would be sitting down already if I were you. All right. Have you ever had to rehome or an adopted pet? Again, no shame. Okay, we're still standing. All right, we're going to talk about vet bills and vet things. Have you ever had, please sit down, if you've ever had an emergency vet bill that you were not prepared to cover or you had trouble affording it? Okay. Have you ever had a pet, your own pet, overdue for vaccinations? Sit down. We're looking at you.
I'm too much of a rule follower.
Preventatives, heartworm test, heartworm at first of the month, every month, flea prevention. All right. You've had a dog that's lived in a house or an apartment without a 6-foot privacy fence. All right. I don't know how many people are in this room, but I just reduced our foster and adoption capacity by under 10. And we have a lot of people in this room. So you can sit down. Thank you so much for that. I know it's a little bit, uncomfortable. So thank you all for being vulnerable in that. I'm not shaming anyone, but I think it's really important to make this personal. It is easy to be like, well, that's us. We work in animal welfare. We're the experts. We're allowed to do that, right? But I mean, this is the reality. We're just people. We're just like our neighbor. We're our friends. We're our parents. I know my dad doesn't have a lot of knowledge growing up about flea prevention and spaying and neutering, but do I think my dad should adopt a dog or cat? Absolutely. He's my dad. So, we need to start looking at our community members and people approaching us to foster and to adopt as just the same as all of us, and a lot of people, this is their first conference. You might be in your first 6 months of working. You might be just learning about, how a distemper parvo vaccine works, right? Or heartworm prevention. These are not things we're born knowing, and it's okay for people. We should expect them not to have this baseline knowledge. It doesn't mean that they can't care for a pet. So I would encourage you, just like we went through this exercise, just like Luis was saying, when you're gathering your team together in a team meeting, have them go through this. You could also even do it with your foster base. If they're also doing adoptions and you feel like they're denying left and right and screening adopters for their own foster pets, this is a good exercise to run your team through. Just makes it personal. So thank you all for participating in that.
So know your community. One of the biggest things that I hear all the time, and from rescuers, from fellow shelter employees, from everybody, from local politicians that we have to deal with. Well, our community is different. And half the time they don't even know what they're talking about. Like, what are you talking about? Do you even know your community? And for so long, we've all been guilty of this in some way in our industry. At least shelters that I come from, for decades practiced this sort of closed mentality, this sort of bunker mentality that it's us versus them. And kind of like what Francis said this morning, the people are the solution. The public is the solution. And if you don't believe in that and embrace that, then good luck. Because we're all people too. And I wasn't born knowing what heartworm disease was. I wasn't born knowing what all these preventatives did or how important it was. In fact, I'm 34 years old, and 5 years ago when I started, I had no idea what heartworms were. So it's not because I hated animals. I loved my animals from day one. I grew up with dogs, but we weren't bad people. We just didn't know. And why didn't we know? Everybody knows that the fire department goes to your school, right? It tells you to what? Stop, drop, and roll. Right? Well, why weren't shelter representatives out there in the community making those connections? You can't expect people to learn if no one's teaching. So it's about being open-minded. And so you got to give people the benefit of the doubt. That's really, are they coming from a place of just maliciousness? Are they, or callousness or indifference? Or do they just not know? That's where I was. Just a few short years ago, even to this day, I'll have one of my staff come up to me, oh, so-and-so tested positive for whatever. I thought, I don't even know what that means. No idea. I'm like, oh, can we afford to treat it? Or have you networked it to rescues? I don't know. Doesn't mean I don't care. I just don't know what you're talking about. And so right here we have one of our staff members going out to different local businesses, dropping off flyers, right? They're the kind of, typically you see them for guitar lessons or whatever, but it's for fostering kittens. And we started doing all this stuff during kitten season, and we're doing it, valley-wide. And so it's really exciting to see people embrace this, and it's great PR for the business, and also they genuinely care. Most people are really nice, so it's a way of us getting out in the community and hopefully getting new fosters. And so, yeah, we've already had people from these businesses call us, say that we need more flyers. People are taking them, and so it applies for adoption as well. I mean, when COVID happened, my God, did we steal ideas? I don't know who started doing the whole thing on pizza boxes for delivery and all the takeout orders, but we absolutely stole that, and it was super helpful. So yeah, you want to get that word out as often as possible. People want to, help. They just don't know how. I had no idea what fostering was 5 years ago. I thought, what is that? Does that even do anything? And then all of us here desperately searching for fosters know how big a deal that is. And so offsite adoption events, a lot of times that can be sort of hard to manage if you have a, really shoestring budget and you have a really small staff. But there are so many other ways to get plugged in to that, even if it's just tabling at an outside of a business, right? With some information about what you do, what your needs are, and how the community can step up and help. So just saying that you need help without any sort of actionable items, right? That's not really going to get you much. But if you can show them exactly what you need and how they can provide that help, your save rate's going to go way up. And so, yeah, one of the things that we do on a monthly basis are our vaccine clinics. We do it at both locations, and we service upwards of 500 pets per clinic. So that's 1,000 people that we see every month going through our facility to get free or low-cost vaccines. And guess what? Every single one can adopt even more animals. They can foster, and so we make sure to constantly push it. Every single opportunity, every single interaction that we have with a human being is an opportunity to get them plugged into our movement. And makes our work a lot easier. So please get out into your community, trust your community. And if you don't trust your community, how can they trust you? I promise you, most of your people are nice. Most of your people in any of your communities are nice. If they weren't, we wouldn't have made all that fantastic progress as an industry over the last few decades. So, it's important to really get out there and know your demographics, be close to it, and be plugged into your community's needs. So.
Absolutely. I also love the little, I think you mentioned it, but you see how they have the little tear off things, like you see it all the time, right? Like offering services out there. So I think that's great. That's your call to action. People can tear it off without taking home a huge flyer. I did hear this morning at the first session, Michelle George from Lifeline talked about a pet health event. I think those are great. You know, you could table and have foster info right there, get out in the community. So as many, you know, events where you're not just asking people to come into the shelter or into your rescue org, but you're getting out there is going to be really beneficial. I know it takes resources. You might be short-staffed. This could be something, you know, those charismatic volunteers that want to talk to everyone and talking your ear off, they might be great advocates for you and ambassadors out there to get out there. Last thing I would just add to this is, you know, when offering free or low-cost services, we, in our minds, historically have seen adoption and foster opportunities and then free and low cost, like pet food banks, as two separate things. Like we're going to cater, you know, this ask to this audience, and then we know in these high need, high intake zip codes, they need this. We have to get away from that thinking. And again, that's where, you know, we're challenging some of our stereotypes and beliefs, but we've been through a lot of sessions today even about the power of community and trusting your community. So we are asking people to take advantage of pet food, right? And to take advantage of low-cost vaccination clinics. I have definitely done all of those things, but it also means I can foster and I can adopt. So offering both of those services at the same site, and I know it might bristle you a little bit. Well, if you can't afford to feed your pet, how are you going to adopt, right? We want people to help us. We want them to help our mission and think about Luis as like the alternative, right? It might not be your perfect home, but it's a good home. And if you can continue offering the services, fostering should be free, right? And if you can offer food to them or crates to them, there's no reason that people in the community, they're already fostering, right? That we can give them the power to keep doing that.
Oh,
sorry, I just inserted myself
sure.
there.
Sorry, one more thing also before I forget. Our emails will be at the end of the slide as well, but have your materials in Spanish too. I mean, not everybody's from Texas, but yeah, I mean, come on, we've got a lot of Spanish speakers all over the country, and especially places like the Rio Grande Valley. You're missing out on such a large segment of the population that could save lives with you. So please find somebody who can translate for you, somebody who knows what they're talking about, and we can get out there and you know, knit our community even closer together and plug them in. So yeah, please don't forget about that. Like, please find a way to get that literature out. And if there's anything that we can provide, we've got pretty much everything covered in both English and Spanish. Be more than happy to email all that to anybody who emails me, but just wanted to, before I forget.
Love it. And just more photos of flyers and getting out there. Great. And I think you have a copy of that flyer that maybe somebody could.
Yes, definitely.
That
more
would
than
be
happy
one
to
thing.
throw
You can
that
add
at you
that, as a resource. All right, number 3, we're getting there. There's 5 totals, so we're getting there. So action item number 3, make data-driven decisions or data-driven decisions. This is one of the biggest things, and I catch myself doing this all the time, going off my gut feelings and my gut instinct and saying, well, last time, you know, that dog was returned because we didn't check their vet, right? So going forward, we need to check all vet references. We need to see proof of that because we're getting an influx of returns. I have to challenge myself sometimes on those blanket things that I say because I don't actually have any data to back it up. So I would challenge your colleagues, yourself, your supervisors, everyone to be like, where's the data? Show me the proof that that actually is the thing that's happening. Because what we're finding is it's not always backed up. And it's just human nature. The bad things stick out in our mind. So of course we're gonna go to that one incident or that one thing that happened and then make this sweeping statement, right? And change all of our policies around that. There has been a lot of studies. I'm not going to bore you with some of the research, but there have been some really important studies that have been done and even more that is so exciting that's happening now. Trust the studies that are out there. This is just a few. The one there's 2 definitely that I would look up, but policy-based adoption. So what they were looking at here in this study is vet checks, landlord checks, really intense application process. The idea behind that is that we are weeding out people that may not be able to care for their pet or, trying to decrease returns and also like making sure we're making a good match, right? But what these studies are showing is that going to what we're calling, and we'll talk about in a second, more of a conversation-based approach versus this interrogation approach actually it doesn't affect the care or the level of care that that pet receives. So I think that's really important. We've been spending hours on like constructing applications and going through all this time when really our time should be spent better having conversations, providing support to set that adopter up for success, and then making a good match, right? Like making sure that there's really good customer service and the person has, they're comfortable in their decision. There's been studies on attachment levels of adopters and cats. Have you ever heard like, we waive fees, we're gonna bring in all those people that just want a free dog or free cat? How many of you, raise your hand, have your dog or cat, past or present, that you didn't pay a fee for? Like you got them for free. I think we have probably a lot of people here because you kind of have an inside deal sometimes, but you can take them home. But you don't even remember that, right? It's like that does not mean that you love your pet any less. And so that is a common, I think we're getting better as an industry. I'm seeing a lot more, fee waived adoptions or reduced. But sometimes you're gonna have staff or fosters be like, I don't like that. Like I think the fee is screening people out. There's been studies that debunk this and say they even looked like, do pets that were adopted without a fee, do they sleep on the bed at night? Is there a level of attachment? And it's like overwhelmingly yes, 98% yes. They have an attachment regardless of the fee. So trust in the studies. There's been so many done about should we be giving them as gifts? Yes, maybe we should talk about it first a little and maybe not surprise somebody with it, but it doesn't mean that that person has to be present. We're looking at pet-friendly housing and analysis of pet fees in Texas. And then, of course, all of these studies, and there's more that I haven't even listed, and then we get CARE's important research about implicit bias in our industry, right? So if you compare the studies that have been done and then combine it with our implicit bias, this is a recipe for disaster. We're thinking about, we have a lot of barriers, we're aware of that, but how does it play into our practices? So trust the data, trust the studies. Hopefully next year we'll be able to share even more. I've been hearing in the background that there's even more really exciting research being done around this, so I think that's great. I'm a big fan, I'm a visual learner, so I don't know if this works for you, but I think it works for some people, but whiteboarding out or use those big giant Post-its, have some strategy sessions with your teams, and whiteboard your entire process. I know it might seem basic, but before even a adopter or potential adopter or foster interacts with you, what is their process like? Like check out your website, how easy it is to contact you or how easy it is to get a reply back if they're interested in a pet. Where are pets visible for adoption or foster? And then go through the process of like, okay, somebody walks in, literally write this out, right? They walk in, what's the process? How are they greeted? What are we asking them to do? What forms are they filling out? How long are those forms? And then what do they have to prove? What do they have to bring? If also looking at your blanket policies in this, start writing those down. For instance, if someone's adopting a dog and they've got 2 dogs at home, are we requiring no matter who they're trying to adopt, they bring everybody in the home there to do a meet and greet, or is it case by case basis depending on who they want to adopt? So think about all the blanket policies, go through every question in your forms and literally write it out. Might take a couple hours, but I really think it's so important. For every step and every policy, I would ask yourself a few things. So the first thing is, what purpose does this serve? Why is this question in here? Why is this process in place? Again, go back to data, right? Well, it's because we want to curb returns. Well, what proof do we have that this is even effective to do that, right? So you're kind of like going back to the data. If you don't have anything to back it, maybe it's out of a feeling and maybe it's out of a stereotype or somebody before you put this in and this is just how it's always been. Is this just another step for the foster adopter to go through? We saw, if you think back on that graph, think about that flat line, that stall, right? We'd love to see next year's conference. We want to see that uptick and that increase of foster and adoption placements. Is this another step for them? What are the steps that they've had to do? And now is this step number 5 in the process? Is this yet another wait time that they have to go through? Do they have to fill out another form? Are they waiting in a 2-hour line? So start thinking about what is it like from the foster adopter's experience. Is this realistic or accessible for all people? Think about people that don't have internet access or they're not tech savvy, right? Is everything mobile based and you have nothing available over the phone or in person, like paper forms for people that might have trouble accessing, on your online system? And then on the switch, right, making it accessible online and not making it only an in-person process. And then obviously we've talked a lot about translations, and Luis talked about it too, making sure that your resources and your process isn't all in English. So we'll go over a few examples of that as well. So really thinking about what purpose does it serve? How is this for the foster adopter? And then is this realistic and accessible? Cool.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's probably the last slide is probably the most important thing that I find out of this whole thing is make data-driven decisions, right? I think there are a lot of emotions, right? I mean, it's a pretty emotional line of work, but we should deal in facts as often as possible. And I think that's really important to focus on. And, when it comes to, approaching our public, what we do is we really try to drill down and ask ourselves all those questions. Are we doing this based off of data, or just because we had this feeling that we inherited from these policies that are from the Stone Ages? So I think just having a conversation with people, wanting to know every time we go to an adoption event, and I actually have a conversation with people. I say, well, how'd you hear about us? How are you? What are you looking for? All that stuff, right? And then they get to just open up, and so yeah, the main thing is like really trying to get out why they want to be a part of this, and what is their perspective on what we do as an organization and how they can help. And I remember when I first got to Harlingen, I remember at my old shelter as well, I would hear it was like an anti-sales pitch about how this dog, are you sure you want this dog? Because I don't know, he looks a little weird sometimes, I don't know, are you going to be prepared? And and one of the things that I would always ask myself, what are you doing? I just don't get it. And so the way we see it, speaking about data again, is that one of the things that I heard when we started wanting to open up the doors and really opening everything to the public is that we're going to get a ton of returns. We're going to get a ton of returns. It's going to be ridiculous. It's going to be a nightmare. And these poor animals, oh my God. Well, just for one example, we moved into our newest shelter in Mission, Texas on February 8th. And based on the data that was provided to us the year prior, when the city still ran their shelter, our intakes are up 65% from the year prior. But most importantly, our adoptions compared to last year are up 175%. And since we've been increasing adoptions month by month like crazy, our first month there we only did 18 adoptions. Last month we did over 100, and we're not getting a lot of return adoptions. Our operations director is here, Melissa. Wave. I'm going to put you on the spot. Yeah. So that's the reason why we have those numbers. Melissa, she'll never take credit. But so yeah, we're not seeing an influx of returns. And so people clearly care. But yeah, so the way we see it, not only are we having a conversation with people to see kind of where they're at, what they're looking for, what their needs are, what their concerns are. That's, how often do you get to be an ambassador for your brand, for this movement? And having that face-to-face, you don't know what's going to happen. You could get a planned giving, bequest out of that conversation from, you could get a foster, you can get a huge donation, you can get potentially a new employee, you could get, there's so many things that you can do. An advocate, one of our best advocates, I just had a conversation with because I was trying to get her to foster a cat. And so you never know what that's going to unlock. It's going to unlock a lot more potentially than just taking one animal home. So one of the biggest things is like reviewing your language. Accessibility was something that Claire touched upon, and we do things as openly as we possibly can. So even things like signing up for our vaccine clinic every month, some people don't have internet. It doesn't mean they're bad people. It means they don't have internet. And so we want to make sure that we have in-person registration for all of our community events as often as possible. I think we have like 2 days a month at least so people can come in, we extend our hours. And again, that's not a mark of somebody's character, whether or not that they know how to operate a smartphone. That doesn't mean anything. And so, and especially when you're in an area that's, has a really high poverty rate, the Rio Grande Valley, all 4 counties of the valley are among the top 10 when it comes to poverty in the state of Texas. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of rural neighborhoods, a lot of rural communities that, transportation is difficult. A lot of times there's a language barrier. Basic utilities aren't even provided for these communities in some cases. And we want to just put this pressure on them that, they have to know everything about online accessibility. That's ridiculous. So we want to put everything, we want to remove all those barriers, as many as we possibly can. And so one of the things in here, animal handling and kind of customer service approach. How many of you would just charge headfirst into a dog that's a little bit fractious, like into his kennel? Would anybody do that? Would anybody jostle around a cat or stick your hand in a feral den? I mean, like, you're setting yourself up and the animal up for failure, right? Like, why would you do that? So it's the exact same thing with people. I know all of us here are animal experts. I'm not exactly a person expert, but I mean, I know a little bit. So yeah, I mean, why would you come at somebody with that aggression and that assumption that they're there to do bad? And one of the things that bothers me the most, and I hear it all the time from people in our industry, is that, oh, well, we got to make sure that the person has skin in the game. We got to charge them a fee and we got to do all this other stuff, right? I think, well, dogs and cats have to eat more than once. Like, they have to continue eating. They're going to need vaccines. They're going to need medical care. They're going to need attention. And so, what more skin in the game do you need than that? And so, yeah, we kind of want to just approach that as, hey, look, would you charge up in an animal's face and, expect, the tail to be wagging? Why would you approach a conversation with somebody that same way? Just be nice. I know it's weird. My staff are probably rolling their eyes because I don't seem nice, but it's true. It's true. You just got to be nice, and people will do a lot of great things for you.
Love it. And look at those happy faces, so cute. All right, so what do we do instead? This is all like good in theory, right? Like, well, okay, we're ready to make a change. What should it look like? I want to preface this. I don't think there's like one template out there. You make it your own. I found a couple that I think are cool examples, and I know you might not be able to read everything there. It's a little bit small, but they are in your app. But this is, I love, first of all, there's a few things on here. I would love a version in Spanish. That would be the only critique I have. But this is from a rescue organization in New England. And it's interesting because it's also a rescue organization. I think we feel like, oh, you're just going to hand out dogs and cats to anyone as a municipal shelter. But rescue organizations also can do this, but it's not about just handing them out willy-nilly, but it's about the process being more welcoming. And you'll hear us saying over and over, less of an interrogation, more of a conversation. Just put that in your head over and over. So a couple things I like. I love how it's not an application, right? It's not this, it's called a consultation form. It sounds a little bit intense. So other ways I've heard it is like a survey or a questionnaire. But it doesn't have to be an application, because when I hear application, I'm like, oh gosh, I've got to prove myself or else I could get denied, right? There is a very clear, you're applying and it's a 50-50 chance maybe. It's no more than one page. I like that. And part of it is like office use only, where your adoption counselor could write some notes about, okay, what are they looking for? It's just getting basic information. And then what are you looking for in a pet? And so that would hopefully help the counselor suggest a few dogs and cats that might be a good fit. And then tell us a little bit about your household. It's open form, so they can say kids, cats, dogs. I need a dog that's good with other dogs, right? That gives you a jumping off point. I think the knee-jerk reaction here is like, what if they lie? What if they don't put it all in there, right? Like, let's question that for just 1 second. And I think that comes down to control a little bit. We don't know if people are lying, and we also don't know if they go home and they're going to move in a month, or they're going to get a divorce, or they're going to have a baby. Like, this is life. Things happen. They get laid off, right? Like, things happen. We cannot control everything in the world. This adoption process will be so much more enjoyable if you just stop giving yourself all that pressure that you have to control everything. So I love this because you're asking what they want to learn about, and it's easy and it sets up for the conversation. I think people would be a little bit scared looking at this, being like, is this all the information I'm going to get from people? But again, think of this as a questionnaire, as a survey, and it's a jumping point off for the conversation. And again, the conversation should be more about matchmaking, spending that time, getting dogs out into the yard to meet potential adopters. Things are going to happen organically. You're going to learn more about them, what they're looking for to set them up for success. It doesn't have to be, though, this pass-fail intense situation. And then, of course, there's time, right? Like 10 pages takes a lot of time, and you all don't have a lot of time, don't have a lot of staff. This is another one. My dear colleague Rory pointed this out to me, and I think this is great. Take note that it's in English and Spanish on the same page. I think that's amazing, right? It's okay that, people can read English and Spanish, and we don't need like a separate form for that. I like how it's all integrated. Also, it's about 3/4 of a page. You see there's a little bottom half here, it's cut off, but for the adoption counselor to take notes. They're asking just basic information because it's, again, going to happen in the conversation. The matchmaking happens more organically. It doesn't have to be formally on this. One of my favorite questions I've seen, it's not on either of these, it's a little bit on the Monadnock Humane Society one, is the question of what would you like to learn more about today? And then a checklist of things like crate training, housebreaking, litter box, like what food to feed my pet. So it's opening up that icebreaker for a better conversation. That's one of my favorite examples. So again, I know this is a little bit small, but it is in the app under resources. If you want to copy and paste, insert logo here. It's okay to be borrowing from other organizations. I think this is a great example. And then last but not least, action item number 5. I think we've threw a lot of information at you today, but the only thing I would encourage you to do is one thing. Take it one thing at a time. It can get really overwhelming if you're like, we got to translate everything. We got to scrap our whole process. We have to do our whiteboarding sessions. Start with one thing and really focus when you go home this year, implement one initiative that you do not have in place, and it's focused on making it easier for people to help. A few things, few ideas, and few questions to ask yourself. Same-day adoptions. It is pretty common to do same-day adoptions now, but not everyone is doing them. We are of a time, an era of instant gratification. You want to capture that person's interest now. If they want to foster now, right? If they want to adopt now, make it easy for them. It should say same-day adoptions and foster, and make it not this lengthy process, right? Make it low barrier to entry. Field trips and sleepover programs are great. I don't think you can just have one. I think you can offer multitude of options where you're encouraging people to short-term foster. Give us a day, give us a weekend, give us a week, whatever you can do. Because as Luis says, it helps, right? You're getting those notes of this dog or cat in a home. You're emptying a kennel, so it's easier to clean, easier for your staff. So there's a lot of benefits of making it just really easy, and they know when there's an end date. What we've seen historically is that, you know, most animals, some will come back, but oftentimes because you're not making it this scary lifetime commitment of adoption after 20 minutes of an intro, that's a lot to ask of people. They get the dog home, they get the cat home, and they're like, you know what, I can do this. And I'm also in love, and I don't want to bring this dog or cat back to you. So they turn into longer-term fosters or even adopters if you can take away that sort of scary intimidation factor. Foster to adopt, whatever you call it, pre-adopt, trial adoptions. I was, back in the day, I was always told, and somehow I got it in my head, that fosters converting to adopters wasn't a good thing. We're like, you have to stay as fosters or you're an adoption, and don't be trying it out. Like we didn't want to have that system. And I would really be like, oh, this person's here and I think they want to adopt, but they came to foster, like that was in my head. I'm like, what am I doing? It's okay. So again, letting loose of that control a little bit, and it's all right for people to try out adoption. We talk about large dogs a lot, right? It is a lot for a bounding large dog with all sorts of kennel stress and presenting horribly in the kennel, to meet them and in 20 minutes say, yeah, I can keep you for 12, 14 years of your life, right? That's a big commitment. You don't know if that dog's going to settle in well or be a good fit. And so that oftentimes, by taking away that intimidation factor, will end up in a large dog adoption if you say, try it out, do a foster, come into this program and foster to adopt. This was eye-opening for me when I stopped thinking of returns as failure. I think we're very risk adverse because we're always scared of the return, right? Everyone's looking around like, who did that adoption? It ended in a return, right? Luis taught me this. Like, again, we're getting so much. The notes, the empty kennel, right? Like, we know the cortisol levels through studies is already reduced after they've left the shelter and get that little break. So make sure if they do come back, you're capturing all that information. How did they do in a home? Obviously, what's the reason for return? Maybe we can, make a decision in the future that's maybe a better match, but we're learning so much about them since they've left the shelter in the home. Take advantage of that. Make sure that they're filling out a questionnaire. I think to me, that was my biggest challenge personally, is getting over that like anger and frustration with the person that they brought this dog back to me or brought this cat back. But reframing that and also setting your staff up and your colleagues up where you're not shaming them for taking a chance with somebody who's like, I've never had a dog before, and this, wild large dogs jumping all over them, setting them up for success and shifting your resources towards helping them support them in their home versus trying to interrogate them and weed them out in the beginning. All right, this is just a recap. Lazy River is waiting, so we just wanted to make sure we did 5 steps. So number 1, align your organization on shared goals. Number 2, know your community, trust your community. 3, make data-driven decisions and changes. 4, implement a conversation-based adoption and foster process. And 5, you can do one thing. Just do one thing this year that makes it easier for people to help. And I love this photo of you and your team. So great. There's our emails if you want to contact us. I think we are right at time, but we'll be here to answer a few questions. But thank you, everyone, for being here.
Thank you.
Yay!
Awesome. Great.